Y'all, the Soul Eater anime holds up impeccably. I only watched it for the first time this year, so I speak with zero nostalgia. I was really impressed with it. The series follows the students of the DWMA, a school established to raise aspiring Meisters and their weapons into the ranks of its special forces. We follow Maka and Soul, a Meister weapon duo, and a handful of their classmates as they study, train, and gather the souls of evildoers. It's a pretty standard magic school premise, but its strengths lie in its execution and the robustness of its cast. Despite not really being huge into shonen, I was sold on at least giving it a try based on all the praise it gets for having such a three-dimensional female protagonist, the cutely transparent references it makes to horror cinema, and the fact that it was animated by Bones. And yeah, the anime delivered on all fronts. Maka is a fantastic main character, and her relationships to much of the rest of the cast are all uniquely complex. The show not only has a smattering of fun horror references, but also delivers on its inspirations by having some surprisingly effective horror sequences, and the animation is just as stellar as anything from Bones, heightening the tension and emotion of every narrative apex. Soul Eater is an all-timer ensemble cast-driven shonen, wherein most of its strongest moments aren't even so much in the culmination of an arc or an excellent action sequence, but in the cast interacting with one another in low-stakes circumstances. I would even go so far as to say the series has a lot of problems that I know I shouldn't overlook, but I don't even care because my fondness for its characters so wildly supersedes any complaints. I'll be brief on its faults for the sake of fairness and say that the show comes off unconfident in its wider narrative and how often it shows then tells again, and in how it occasionally leans heavily into more played-out shonen tropes. It also suffers when giving time to the few characters who just aren't nearly as compelling as the rest. But even then, the existence of that problem itself belies its greatest asset, its character writing. Death the Kid is a pretty all-encompassing example of the anime's penchant for giving easily understandable character archetypes a few extra layers to really let them flourish and stand out above their contemporaries. I think even people who don't know Soul Eater know the deal with Kid, whose obsessive idiosyncrasies play out in just about every way imaginable. Nerfing your most adept character by giving him crippling neuroses makes for an instant win in my heart. What I like especially about Kid is that his perpetual awareness of his role as the son of the DWMA's headmaster doesn't preclude him from behaving like a young boy. We see him play around with Black Star and Soul and behave in much the same bullheaded fashion as a young teen would. That's one of Soul Eater's coolest aspects too. The main cast are children, and they're allowed to be children. The adult cast are just as important too, with the staff at the Academy getting fleshed out both in relation to and separate from the main cast. Dr. Stein's disorderly relationship to the scientific world and subsequent self-isolation conflicts with his duties as an instructor and a Meister, and contrasts the personality and motivations of his weapon, Spirit. We learn that Death plays up his goofy exterior to keep the Academy's student body at ease, and that he's got a much more serious, bureaucratically minded side under the surface. Even though we don't get a ton of him, in the anime at least, I haven't read the manga, the Wandering Samurai Mifune's got one of the most complex motivations in the whole series, challenging the DWMA's righteousness on a fundamental level. Everyone's super well-rounded, with even kids bimbo cowgirls getting a decent amount of interiority. The only characters the series really fails are Black Star and Tsubaki. Black Star's weird fixation on surpassing God is never treated as anywhere near as concerning as it always comes off, repeatedly giving him a pass for treating the rest of the cast, especially Maka, with a lot of unreasonable cruelty. Tsubaki, his weapon, winds up being reduced to an almost entirely passive role, with the one arc she does undergo mostly just being in service to confusedly demonstrating more of Black Star's personality and motives than it does Tsubaki's own. Maka, atop being a compelling protagonist in her own right, shines most when paired with others. Her relationship to her deadbeat dad is all at once hilarious, sad, sweet, and relatable. Each of the duo is uniquely sympathetic, with Maka having every reason to feel disdain for her father, and with Spirit being shown to truly care about his daughter and being entirely inept at prioritizing that love in ways that come across to her. Neither's feelings negate or invalidate the others, and therein lies the nuance. Maka and Soul's dynamic is strong too, allowing Soul's understated characterization to come out in full effect. Soul comes off a little undercooked, We see that he's got a preoccupation with being cool and aloof, but this never really comes to much of a head, instead being switched out for an inner struggle with a yearning for greater power in order to protect his friends no matter the cost, which also doesn't amount to too terribly much. When connected back to Maka, however, we see the most interesting facets of those arcs play out. Soul is quick to break down his aloof exterior when it's for Maka's benefit, and likewise it's Maka's ability to disarm Soul that removes his internal conflict with the dangerous power he's tempted to tap into. And all of that happens without Soul and Maka's relationship ever being framed as intrinsically romantic. Hell, I'd even say that Maka's dad's relationship to Stein is framed as more romantically charged. Above all, Maka's strengths as a protagonist come out in full force when she's paired with the series' actual, secret, not at all secret best character, Crona. God, Crona's so good. Crona owns so much. Okay, so, like a lot of Soul Eater, a description of Crona's arc on paper is pretty established genre affair. An unwilling villain given the chance at a better life through the empathy of a protagonist, but it's all in execution. Crona is an immediately likable character. From the onset, their personality is clearly defined. Perpetually nervous and ill-equipped for everything put upon them, using raw power as a shield for their emotional vulnerability. Before there's even an inkling that they'll wind up on the side of the DWMA, it's impossible not to want to root for them on some level. Every time they said, "I can't deal with this," I was endeared to them more and more. I think this is especially helped by what a fantastic job their Japanese and English voice actors do in characterizing them. Maya Sakamoto is always great, but I honestly think Maxie Whitehead suits them even better. There's so much pathos in her performance.
That hurts me. It hurts! Stop moving around like that, you're squeezing me! Don't poke me! Ow, stop already! Don't push my nose!
The entire dub cast is great, honestly. Props to Funimation for making a dub I actively preferred watching over the original voice track. During Maka's second fight with Crona, she enters Crona's soul and experiences the sadness that lies within them, a childhood of abuse and manipulation at the hands of a mother who only ever sought to use them as an experimental tool. Maka sees in this moment that Crona needs the warmth of another person more than she thinks she needs revenge for the wound Soul received during their first encounter with Crona, and in the end, Crona and Maka both grow a little. This is again a simple notion, but the imagery within Crona's mind is evocative, and the emotions at play are so clearly and directly communicative. The anime's second season sees Crona enrolling at the DWMA, reluctant to be around others for the first time, still feeling shame for having previously fought against the Academy, and being unfamiliar with how to deal with both large groups and with others engaging them in good faith. You 100% go into this arc expecting there to be some amount of friction caused by their presence from within the main cast, but they immediately recognize Crona as one of their own, going out of their way to make sure they feel just as welcome and accepted as they are. Crona's adjustment to life at the DWMA is slow, their trauma not so easily absolved by having simply made a friend. Over time, they slowly open up to their new companions, learning to enjoy life at the Academy and recognizing the warmth of others as genuine. You know that Simpsons bit that's like,
whenever Poochie's not on screen, all the other characters should be asking, "Where's Poochie?"
That's exactly how I feel about Crona, sincerely. They make every other character better just by being in the same scene as them. Take Marie, an instructor at the Academy introduced in Season 2. Her defining personality trait is her kind disposition. Not a bad thing, but pretty simple. When paired with Crona, however, this takes on an understatedly motherly dynamic. Marie sees that Crona needs extra compassion and treats them as an equal, using their mutual newness at the Academy as a common ground for the duo to establish a connection, one that Crona needs as a positive replacement for the role their mother once played in their life. Holistic improvement with proximity to Crona is no more the case than with Maka, which is saying a lot because she's already one of the best and most fully realized characters on her own. There's this small moment where Crona, feeling conflicted about their remaining sense of duty toward their mother, asks Maka about her mom. Maka says she admires her mother and that, despite her absence, she still loves her. She's her mom after all. I love this moment. Maka doesn't seem to realize the wider implications of what she says, how such a notion would come across to Crona given their own experiences, despite her meaning well by it. when Crona is later manipulated by their mom into betraying the academy and is so racked with guilt that they try to wordlessly leave the academy to live out the rest of their life in solitude, Maka is the first to go after them. When they come clean to her, Maka's response is one of frustration, but not with their betrayal. Instead, with Crona's insistence on blaming and speaking ill of themselves for actions they ostensibly had no control over. The two cry it out, and so do you, the audience. Likewise, Marie doesn't immediately forgive Crona for their actions, but doesn't scold or turn her back on them. It would have been so easy for the show to milk drama out of this moment, pushing Crona away from the cast until the end of the series to ostensibly repeat their arc a second time. And for a while into season 2, it seems like that's the direction it's headed in, but everything resolves in such a mature way, one that delivers on the audience's desire to see Crona succeed and heal and be happy. So, the elephant in the room with Crona is without a doubt their gender. It's a nice elephant, a kind and gentle elephant, but an elephant nonetheless. I really don't have much to say about it because it's never addressed in the series, with the creator outright stating their gender is unknown. What's interesting to me about this is that their arc has nothing to do with a crisis of identity or anything like that. None of the cast ever even comments on it. They simply accept Crona so unquestioningly that their gender never comes up. And I think that's neat. Of note is that the anime and original translation of the manga use he pronouns when referring to Crona, most likely because they use the first-person pronoun boku, which generally, but not always, is considered a masculine pronoun. Meanwhile, the recent updated Yen Press translation uses they pronouns. I am plainly disinterested in making a case for Crona's gender one way or the other within the confines of a video essay being broadcast to an unknowable number of strangers, but I'll say that Atsushi Okubo stating Crona's gender is unknown doesn't in any way disprove the possibility that they're non-binary, just that we don't know where they fall on the gender spectrum. Furthermore, I ask that you question what worth there is in trying to deny others the right to view Crona as a rare instance of non-binary representation in mainstream anime. And before anyone tries to argue that viewing Crona as non-binary is an act of inflicting Western political ideals into Japanese media, the equivalent Japanese term X-gender has been in circulation independently from and for the same amount of time as what is generally thought of to be non-binary's precursor term genderqueer. So yeah, Crona's great, and is the crowning example of Soul Eater's ability to effortlessly endear and invest you in its characters. I've only just recently watched this series, but already I can say with certainty that Crona's an all-time favorite character of mine. Okay, that's all. Thanks for listening. See ya!